And so we had to, when we started working on competitions, we started reading many briefs, and there's one thing that we saw very common at that time, and that was the idea of sustainability. And what constituted sustainability was more about the environmental sustainability. So that came to our mind that this is something that you would have to actually work on in every project. And it is true that at that point, everybody was talking about sustainability, and it was the paramount importance to get your understanding of sustainability itself. But what we realized is that there is one aspect that was not being discussed, and what we felt very closely about is the social milieu, what we call the social environment, was getting eroded. And this is something that nobody talks about, so what we call social sustainability. And there is no point-rated system like Griha for social sustainability. Nobody talks about that. We as humans are very social, but nobody talks about this. And so when we were working on this, so I talked about sustainability when there were technologies changing. So people were always prescribing technologies rather than looking at first principles that you see below, which actually creates design, whether when you're looking at ventilation, whether you're looking at light, whether you're looking at passive cooling. These actually created spaces, form, and a kind of a morphology depending on where you built in the country actually. So all of this understanding we were trying to build together, but we said that this whole gap, this idea of social sustainability is so big, and who is going to pay for it? If you tell a client that, there is something called social sustainability, he'll say, what does that mean? Let's put a recreational room or something. That's how they would get away with it. But we said, no, actually it is something that has to go through projects, across projects to build this idea. So how do you actually make it happen in a project? So you look at a brief, and any brief that is given to you, about 20-25% of your brief would be what we call corridors or non-program spaces, like free of FAR spaces. So these non-program spaces, apart from the client's program spaces, you have non-program spaces. And we said this 25%, which amounts to a lot on a big projects, becomes a part of your social sustainability use. So very clearly, any project would have a corridor. But if you turn this corridor into a learning corridor because adjacently to a classroom, it starts working like a corridor that you can use collaboratively, you see. So we started using every space that you can use for lobbies can become interactive spaces as lobbies rather than serving only as lobbies. So you start taking every space in your building, whether it is a courtyard, whether it's a balcony, whether it's a terrace, whether it's a deck, and start looking at it as a social space. So that became our endeavor through our practice. And so that's how we started our journey actually. And we were also looking at building across India because most of these competitions were, and actually the projects I'm going to show you today are all out of competitions. And we consistently do competitions. And we are also building different typologies of buildings, because we are building in different climates, different densities, because projects in rural areas are very different from urban areas. So the densities are very different, scales of projects are very different. So we were trying to categorize them. So the first project I'm going to discuss today with this thread in mind, the idea of social sustainability, is this small campus. It's actually a retrofit building. And why I need to show this is because IIID is about interior design. So this is a retrofit and it's about interior design. So I start with this. It's a school called Bombay International School. So this school 50 years ago. There were no concept of international schools that time. But a bunch of artists, architects, many even actors came together in Mumbai and said that instead of education, we should focus on citizenship. And we need to make good citizens rather than making only people who are educated. And that journey took them to this idea of an international school. So it's the first international school in Mumbai, and it started out of a home. It is actually a residential building, if you can see, in Mumbai. That's Marine Drive, that's the Queen's Necklace, and that's the site. So it is very much around Marine Drive, and it was a residential building. So the story that one classroom led to in the house became the whole house. One house led to the other house. Today they own that building with a few tenants. Now they are the owners of the building or the school, but they have slowly bought out the entire school. So it's a heritage building that they bought out. So when we were called, it was a competition, and they called us, and when we went and saw it, some of the spaces were very nicely designed, but every space was very differently designed. So we tried to find out, these spaces are nicely designed. So they said, yes, they're all designed by architects, but they are all different architects. So we said, how did this happen? So the story goes that this is a parent-run cooperative school. So that means the parents have to actually do service in the school. So that means the parents run everything except educating. They don't teach. They run the food mess, they run everything. The mothers cook there, it's a lot of service. So the architects who are parents design the spaces. So one architect has designed one space. So he said, oh, now we get the picture. So they said, why do you want us? No, we want one architect to design everything now. Okay, so the competition starts. So we started analyzing this building. And like I said, what was social about it? We were looking at the map of social footprint. You know, it's a parent-run school. That's the parents outside, because they're always outside. There's no space for them inside the school. It's a parent-run school. And we said, how do we increase the social footprint for parents as well as students? So that is the start of the concept. And then we started looking at spaces. All the spaces were very, very badly organized. I'll give you one instance. They have a kitchen on the ground floor, and the food is taken on the third floor. They don't have an elevator. The dal goes for 300 kids up and from the stairs. So this is double jeopardy. If the dal falls, the kids will get hurt, staff will get hurt. So we said, let's fix these problems. So we started fixing all these problems. And there comes the plan. So what you see here, number 6 is where your kitchen is. And we converted the first 5, 4, and 3 into spaces for dining. It was not contiguous, but all are dining spaces. But what it also did is, it gave a space for the teachers to meet, the parents to meet, because they didn't have a space in school. They were outside the veranda, always outside. So we said we should have a space for them, and that they are multi-use spaces. So we started. The next thing we were looking at is also you can look at 10. We started making these chill out zones for students so that you can use the chalk outside. And the pre-primary is here. So this part of the building you can see is owned by somebody else right now, but of course it's already taken over. We already done this. So here you can see that the labs are here. So what we did is, conceptually we said that instead of having classrooms, let's call them subject rooms. That means you can create immersive environments when you have a subject room. A teacher doesn't have to go class to class, but the students go from class to class. So you give a geography person a chance to create an environment of geography or history. So the classrooms become immersive subject rooms rather than classrooms. So that's what we were doing with all the rooms, like math rooms, language rooms, like language studios where they have audio equipment in the language room. So this is the highest floor. Actually, you come where you have that's a basketball court there actually, and it has a stage, so it's a multi-purpose space. You have other spaces, music room and yoga room and things like that. So in effect, we are trying to create this kind of communication through the chalk there, actually what you see there, with the chill out spaces in section. And that's actually after we finished the project. So in Mumbai, you know, space is a constraint. So what people tend to do is, these verandas that are there on the ground floor were taken up by the school. And we said we have to open it up, because actually the veranda is the air conditioner of a building. It allows the western sun to shade. It allows the building to breathe. So we opened it up, and now we see students using those spaces very positively, rather than just putting glass on the outside. So this is that dining area that I talked about on the lower floor, where parents also use it for their meetings. The parents are very happy. Otherwise, they were outside that veranda sitting, you know. So you can see jack arches, this building. So we did very little actually. We just had to clean up the old flooring. The floorings that were damaged, we had to create a new pattern. And we had to simply, design lighting actually. That was the biggest challenge. Otherwise, everything was keeping the wood the way it was. I mean, sometimes the architect's role is very simple. You don't have to do much. And that's what you realize, you know. So this is the pre-primary section, which is the drama, language and drama room for them. So we created a small stage, you know, for them at their scale. And that's how they use it for their, you can see them singing all on that one little stage. And this is one of their reading and play areas. So what we created a play area where they actually can go and discover a book. They find their book. I don't think we'll fit into it, but those kids really go up and find their book and they find a place to sit and read also. So this is the biology space that so even the skeleton we realized had a name. So we said, let's make this skeleton in the window and put him there, because everybody knew his name. We didn't know. He had a name. The skeleton had a name. So we just put him in the window of the corridor so everybody can see him, And that's the art space. We said, okay, it should have more lights. So on the corner, library. One of the things we realized is that the library was using all the storage in the center. So we pushed all the books to the side and the periphery so that you free up the space in between. Remember, this is a load-bearing structure, 115-year-old building designed as a residence, please, in Mumbai. Huh? So now we are talking about a school. And just to give you an idea, our earlier CM, now the deputy CM, he could not get his kids into this school. So it's that elite school, and that's only because he can't give time to do service. That's why. There's no other reason he could not get his kids in. So that's then the library for the older kids. What we did is we created a module like this where they could play around with it and make multiple combinations. So they could fix this the way they want to on a given day, and they use it the way they want to. And every time we go there, the pattern is changed. They can make it into 2 or 3 sections. They can make it into 1 section. And this is the balcony of the building that I talked about. And these are the normal classrooms, what we call. So these are combinations where you have geography and history. You can slide away the doors and they combine to become one classroom. So even subjects sometimes in the international curriculum try to combine history and geography together to teach. Of course, today you have smart boards and projectors. That's something that is happening. Yeah, and also that we did get an IIID award, so thank you IIID again. So this is the staff room. We realized the sloping roofs could be removed and made into a glass roof so that they could get more light. So small things like that. Architects actually, when you have such a beautiful roof, with these trusses, wooden trusses, I don't think architects have to do much, right? So, but in the end, the space has to speak. Even if it was a steel roof, we said, let it be steel. We don't do much with it. We'll expose our air conditioning and keep it as simple as we can, And the challenge was there were 19 types of flooring because residential building, right? So we had to create a pattern of our own. So we extrapolated out of the geometry a pattern that evolved into making of the flooring across the entire space. So it became a kind of an idea where from the window side, you have a lighter flooring that comes in the center and becomes darker, so that the space, when it brings in light, it bounces off and you get more light in the space. So the idea of evolving the flooring was an extensive process. It's looking very seamless here, but I kid you not, in the office it is a very extensive process of geometry and iterative processes, and I don't think we used any AI 5 years ago to make this happen. Kids were doing it by drafting, so it was not AI. So those are the details that you see, the old flooring with our new floorings there and there. And just simply, you can see the joists over there, and you just see the light that we've designed is a simple bar. Actually, there's nothing we've done. Just suspend the bar, and the light is thrown to the roof to show the roof, as well as give light to the tables. And this is, of course, I think this is the neighborhood we are talking about. Beautiful. If you all know this project, it's a large campus here. Small campus, but very large building, I would say. SPA Vijayawada. And what strikes you when you come here is actually the Gundadala Hills. They are beautiful hills, and we said, this is something you want to capture. This is the kind of skyline you want to maintain, should not be very tall, and that is what was in our mind when we started this project. But actually, on the contrary, what happened was the brief. It was a design competition, where in the first stage, when we read the brief, we saw that, and we started modeling it, and we started realizing that 500,000 square feet on 7 acres was very tough. Some of our buildings were going to 8 and 10 floors. So we said, oh, this is a lot of height for a urban campus, of a residential campus. So we should bring it down. So when we looked closely at the brief, actually, we saw that all the residential, like the student residential rooms were all single rooms. So what we did is, when we studied architecture, when you leave a home and go, we stayed in twin rooms with our friends, and we made a new family, right? And we said, this is the idea of, how you bring the idea of social milieu, where you make new friends, but you need a room partner. So we said that from first year to third year, you will have twin rooms. And thereon, when you become a senior, you will have a single room, and the masters, of course, will be a single room. So we brought the whole area program by about 1/3 there, and also the cost by 10 crores down on a 100 crore project at that time. So obviously in the second stage, the brief was changed, and the other competitor says, but what do we do now? How do we change our concept? So they said that is what. So that's when we realized that actually what we did change the brief. And it was written by architects, by the way. So our intent was to question the brief, and because you cannot live in tall apartments as a student. So that's the campus plan. If you visit the deep plan building on top, there is the institute. And when you are building at 2 FAR is not very easy to build. And if you want to build tall, it is easy. But if you want to build low, it is very tough, because you want light and ventilation in every small room. So there were strategies. In a deep plan building like the institute, we were doing large pockets of light. So like a Swiss cheese box with sort of spaces that give you ventilation from the top and the side. Similar ideas for the residential, which is this L-shaped building. Your 2 separate buildings. That's the girls, this is the boys. I think that has changed because the girl percentages have gone up in the school. And that's the dining hall there, down there with the visiting faculty room. So that's the plan, and we wanted to leave the playground free. Initially they didn't have the land, and then we still wanted to respect that. So that's the master plan, I would say, of the 500,000 square feet. This is a picture that we chanced upon, and I thought this is very relevant to us. And the intent was to create social spaces that are embedded within the cultural context, along with an environmental sensitive response to create built environment which enables learning and living as a community. And I think this is very important, that if you cannot express yourself, I think in a campus that becomes very, I think it's restricting. So what was actually interesting about this is that you see children doing rangoli, but the most important thing is the shadows of the umbrella. That means even if it is very hot, which you know Vijayawada is what we call Blazivada, still the umbrella works. So we said, okay, this idea of umbrella is fantastic. So when we are looking at the institute block, we said it's a massive building. We'll put a massive umbrella like a parasol on top of it and start. And then we said that why can't the building itself become a parasol? So we took up 2 floors of the building and made it into the parasol that gives you shade. So then we added structure and textures and to the building, porosity. We also tested it for the shadows in the day, in the night, and the year, and which are the spaces that you could use in these shadows of the building. Conceptually, in Vijayawada, hot, humid, you need the winds to go through, so you need that cross ventilation for the southern side. You need north light, so the building folds up, so you see only north light. And if it's a deep plan space, you need light to come from the top through a double light space to send light deeper into the space. So how you actually sculpt the building form, and the lower part of the building is embedded in the ground. So there is actually a lot of thermal mass with shadow on top. So it becomes a very clever strategy environmentally to keep your building cooler at the lower levels. And also in terms of a strategy, how you use your program in the day when the box is still colder, you do your morning programs on top, and then you move to the workshops and the lower areas where it is still cooler. Yeah. So the many strategies, the architectural academic zoning I've explained over there. And there are elements of architecture, which is the roof, which is a sculpted form. There is a pavilion in between. There is a plinth that is folded. And the formal strategy of flotation on top, the urbanscape in between, and embeddedness in the lower part. So these were the conceptual ideas we developed in the competition time. And we tried pretty much to do the same thing. It's not that it's changed. That's just the abstract ideas. In plan, we are looking at the lower sections of being a center and periphery kind of idea for interactive learning. The center sections of the building are more informal for networked exchange. This is what I call the social milieu, how to improve it. And the third part is the top, which is a grid, which is very efficient, where the studios are. And that's the circulation diagram of all the staircases and how they connect to all the programs. So in effect, the program that you see below is all the workshops. The concourse level has only the administration area, and the rest of it is like a stilt. So if you go there, there's a canteen on the western side. It's all open. It's very welcoming, actually. Cool winds move through that space. Faculty rooms are the next 2 floors, which is very lean boxes. And the top floors are the parasol, which is the studios and the lecture halls. So conceptually, it is very simple. Ground floor has the heavier program, like the books, that's the library right in the center. And somewhere we do believe the library still should be the center of attraction. And people circumambulate it like a temple, you can say. But in a sense that it's a building within a building. So it's like a building. The library is a building, but there's a larger building. So it's a building within a building. And then you can see on the first floor, you see the concourse level where there's only administration on that side and this is open. And there are two main cores to the building with the elevators you can see going across the building where all the ducts go. So some people always ask us, where are the services in this building? But they are all actually within this area. All the services are all crammed in there and they go up and down and go horizontally. So it's a very simple strategy of putting your services in and moving them horizontally. And then when you go to the top floor, you can see the studio spaces which are double height and single height. So in section, what you see is that we are creating this whole idea of a deep gateway. So when you go to, you feel very welcomed. And in the other section, you see the street level is slowly being brought into the building. So it's like a streetscape slowly becoming the urbanscape of the building itself. There's a lot of talk about, the urbanscape, but nobody talks about the social scape of a building. And I think that is very important, how you connect these two. So the building sections varied at every 10-meter grid. So we said that we need to, if I have to cut a section, how is the section here versus how is the section here? So we made a model that you could move. It's very easy to do it in SketchUp. You just move the section line and it gives you a section. So you can see the ground plane starting there, coming into the entrance, the raking of the library roof, which becomes the GBM area. Then that comes towards the eastern side. It comes to a double helix staircase in the administrative block. Which will happen right now, that double helix staircase. Yeah, that's the double helix staircase. And it comes to the eastern garden. So on the western side, what you see is a building that projects out to create shadow. On the eastern side, the building is pulled out to create gardens on this side. This is the eastern side. So that's the building from the western side, where you see these shadows that are created. And also, it's also in a way a spectatorship. How these deep balconies become viewership for the basketball court and the games area that is on that side. And to add to it, our auditorium is here, embedded in. So the auditorium is an air-conditioned space. So the more you put it below the ground, the temperature differential is as good as nothing. So you don't have much heat load on the and it's on the northern side, which is shadowed by the building itself. It is a green roof, so people can use it as an OAT. And people have. So simple things, I mean, I myself have never spoken about it, is that this element, people would never know what that element is. Actually, it is the basement ventilation. If Richard Rogers or Norman Foster would do it, they would be pipes. But if you have to do it in India, you would do it differently and you have to do it this way. I think we spent a lot of time for that, that casting of the block. Srinivas, we remember, there were iterations and iterations for this one block and its sizing and its weight. So the building comes, when we present it, it comes through very smooth and easy, but actually there was a lot of iterations with the client, involvement, how to get it done, how does it look, and to create it. Even this Tandur stone, we went to Tandur. We were built with a government agency, CPWD, and there was like, who uses Tandur stone here? I said, you are in, this is the best place to get Tandur stone, So there was a lot of that kind of involvement from everybody to achieve what we achieved. That element there is the cotton steel lure. So the faculty spaces actually are shaded and in a way filtered also when they look down so that nobody looks into them. That's the eastern side of the eastern gardens. These trees actually have grown a lot now. So these are old finished photographs. And of course, Srinivas, credit to you on the signage there. I remember there were iterations of that also. And this is the central space. So we believe that the student should get the center stage. That is the space for their GBM, general body meetings, and that's the raking of the floor that actually the library is below that. This is where you enter the space. So there are many of these spaces like a crit space that we created, that folded portion there where students can interact there. These bridges go across the planning faculty and the architecture faculty. I don't know which one is which side now, I've forgotten. That is planning, and this is architecture. These are faculty spaces and the studios are on top. So this is, again, never lose sight of the connections with the city itself. That was very important, that when you go around these staircases that you see the city and the hills. And the idea of this transparency, that although you're a 5-story building, it never feels like a 5-story building because you're actually communicating across floors. So the voids allow you to communicate across the floors. And for instance, when we won the competition, we were very short of staircases. So we did a design competition in the office, and one kid came up with this idea that, we can have a double helix. It's a DNA structure. So what it actually does is, on a single plan, you have 2 staircases. So you increase capacity to double by having 2 staircases on the same plan. This is a tricky one, because if you have staircases that are very wide, they really feel disproportionate. So you have a smaller staircase, but 2 in the same plan. So you will actually go in these staircases, but never meet the other guy, but it reaches the same floors that you're talking about. But do visit it because it's an interesting, fun staircase. So yeah, those are some of the spaces where the skylights come in, and we'll talk about these things called the learning corridors. I talked about this whole idea of how to use corridor spaces effectively. When you open in architecture schools, what tends to happen, we have a lot of juries, right? And juries don't have spaces because we tend to move all our models, our tables. So we said, why can't you have juries across in these corridors? So everybody's work is presented outside. So people who are from the lower years see the upper years work, and vice versa. So it becomes like a learning corridor rather than just a circulation space. So this is like a 10 meter by 100 meter corridor that we sort of worked with. Yeah, those are the photographs of that space. The voids, when it comes, the studios, the double height, and from the side on the south side. So it's a box because you don't want much light going into classrooms and studios, overlooking from the ground into the sky. And that's at twilight on the western side. That's from the other side of the road. This is just after sunset. So the lighting up of the building, if you've seen, there is no lights in the ceiling. It's all underlit. So it's very simple. There's no lighting designer here. You take big, large lights and underlight the whole sort of concrete box. And one of the faculty member made a calendar that time, interesting how students were using the space, and that's that sketch, and how they use that space, that general body meeting space. And this is some of their programs. I think this was a Republic Day. Prashanti, you're taking a photograph, I can see. There, right there. First row. And this is the residential part. So we are talking about living now. Campuses are about learning, but we move on to living also. And living is a very important part where we're looking at, in living, the issue with the social milieu is social control. And I think we were having a large discussion yesterday on how difficult it becomes to control. But the idea is to liberate. And I think that is what we've been working on all our campuses, where we say that we should not be controlled. Like the idea of the diagram of the panopticon, where you are controlled by the authorities, should reduce. And that was the idea behind this whole, so that you don't have linear corridors that control you. So here's the girls and boys, but this has changed now. So what we were doing actually is, we started with embedding 25 courtyards across the spaces, and then these, conceptually we were working with the same idea of lower areas have porous spaces where winds go through the courtyards and pick up the hot air and move out. On the tops, you can see there are terraces. So the lower spaces are more like day spaces where you keep you cool in the shadow, and the evening spaces are the terraces above, which fold up there. So the whole idea of social sustainability and how we were looking at circulation, typologically it is very simple. There are single loaded corridors, there are double loaded corridors, they are all in a formation of a C. Sometimes they all come together as different combinations to create this. That's the typology. Just an animation will give you an idea how we evolved it. Create the voids first. Then the voids are then connected with these gardens and stilts that connects all the voids. There's vertical circulation. We all know these formulas, right? 20 meters, you have to have a staircase, make a radius, create staircases, connect it horizontally, and that creates the entire morphology around the small courtyards that we created. Yeah. So you will see these blocks, the different types. So each of these blocks have a different DNA. There are 3 types of blocks that have been used. The type A, which has a stilt deck and a terrace. One has the staircase in it with rooms. The other has the toilets with the rooms. Yeah, so that's the breakup of the rooms, stilt, deck, terrace. So you have all these social elements like terraces and deck embedded within the block. And when you actually look at it, it comes together. Yeah, that's the module actually, A, B, and C. And it comes together like that. Now, if you ask me also, I don't know which one is A, which one is B, which one is C. It is not, I will not be able to tell you if I go there. But only this drawing is telling me because it's put as A, B, and C. So what this actually does is, I can take this block and create iterations over iterations with different plans. So there are about 15,000 options. No AI again, so it's not done with AI. It's done with some normal idea of modularity. But we are using modularity to create non-standard design. It is not using modularity to create standard design, but it creates non-standard design. Because you see, when you talk about modularity, that's the problem with modernism, right? They create standardization and they make it like an assembly line where there is no variation, so we are all like machines. So this opposes that whole logic. Those are the plans. Lower level, ground floor, more porous. The denser first floor and second floor and third floor has the terraces for evening spaces. And a section again, which allows for the winds to go through. Again, we worked on this idea of the jalis, you can see, for winds to go through in the courtyards. So actually, these courtyards have, let's say, 25 courtyards, 400 elevations of them. Each of the elevation faces are different. Not one of them has the same elevation. So that's what this kind of a non-standardization idea creates. All of them look different. Courtyards. And contiguous courtyards. You start seeing one courtyard leading to the other through these tilted areas. And you see these cascading terraces that come. So they create very intimate, communicative spaces. And, whole continuous seamless courtyards that you start seeing. A confluence of courtyards sometimes. And jalis with the stilt areas. So those are the evening spaces, the terraces. That also at the mid-level you have these kind of communicating decks. Yeah, so there's some stairs on the terraces and endlessness of these voids that are there and the connection to the sky. That's more or less the entire campus. That's how it sits in the landscape. So the idea was not to go very tall, and we tried to manage that for the student living. This is, I thought Srinivas said that you should have this slide, and I said, we won numerous awards for this and grateful. We are humbled by it. So just thought I'll put it up there. So this is a campus this is the first competition we did 20 years ago. Again, similar ideas of living, where we were looking at questioning, it's called the Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya. And when we were looking at this idea, it's a postgraduate university, and we said, why should people, so the brief again, when the brief comes to you, you wonder, there is a language school, the students will stay, the first year will stay, the girls will stay, the boys will stay. And we said, why don't we all create a village-like community for these adults? They're adults, they're all post-professional, live together. So we wanted to create a village. So we took the single room, the twin room, the transit scholars, the common rooms that we added, and the toilets, and made it like a village community. And we put them as standard blocks to create non-standard design. So these are the standard blocks with the corridors, deep corridors, so you can use them, and made different permutations and combination. All we did was added a common room, and we said that the common room is where people can come and cook and recreate in that common room, And so it is a sloping site, so we put it together on the site. And that's the kind of striated program that you can see the common room dotted around. So that's where the community comes together. So that's the section. It's a rural area, so it's a low-rise, low-density kind of format. And it was built at 650 rupees a square foot 20 years ago. It's simple. It's load-bearing walls. When you have a hot, dry climate, actually you don't need too much opening aperture. So you start reducing the opening, then you start realizing, why do I need columns? So you eliminate the columns and you bring down the cost of the building by doing load-bearing construction. Again, these are the paths that lead you to the common room, because everybody is trying to go to the common rooms from different areas. It's like a village kind of a settlement that you move through the landscape. So again, this also was a project that and this is again for the non-teaching staff. So it's very unfair actually. What happens to the non-teaching staff? In government, they are very ruthless. The family size will be the same or more for a non-teaching staff, but they get a smaller house. So what we said is that we will give house extension in a form of a stilt or a terrace for the non-teaching staff in an interlocking manner in courtyards, and with a butterfly roof, so they get this stilt and terrace you can see there. One gets a terrace, one gets a stilt, and that's how they come up to their terrace. So it's for the lecturers. We had a split type unit with a row house situation. For the professors, we had a bungalow type, and that's for the vice chancellor. So I was called for a lecture to Nagpur, and I said, I want to go and see the campus. And to my surprise, after the trees had gone, this is the lecturers' housing. It still exists after 20 years. It feels still like a relevant housing project. People are happy living there also. And I hope even SPA Vijayawada gets faculty housing. That was the plan. I think this is the last project about living. So in a campus in Mumbai, it's called the VJTI. It's a premier engineering institute. And they are a 16-acre campus, and they came 2 competitions, one for a master plan and one for buildings. So we won the master plan. So this is actually a 150-year-old British built building in the center. And over time, there were buildings developed around it. And over time, what tends to happen is the center starts shifting. And that's evident, right? When you start developing a campus, the center will shift. So we realized, but these centers were getting fragmented. They were not connected. So in the master plan, we developed a strategy of how to allow for this seamlessly to connect. The densities will always go higher and higher. The need for FAR is there. They have 4 FAR. But how do you connect these centers, make them contiguous? So we won the master plan. And then we won another competition for a building. This is a postgraduate hostel in the same campus. It's next to the Maidan. So if I go back to that plan, that's where this building I'm talking about is, and that's the Maidan. So we were looking at making this kind of building connected to the Maidan with these decks. So the ground floor, this is the podium floor. So the ground floor is a deep plan dining area, and the kitchens, everything is there, but then the podium is free, so you kind of seamlessly go onto the podium. And then the idea of, again coming back to the idea of social sustainability. What is important is you don't want to social control, I talked about, but what I didn't talk about is social equity. Now social equity is very important. What tends to happen in a dense tall building, Bombay FAR is high, right? We go tall, we have no choice. So the common program, people tend to put the amenities on the ground floor, first floor, and finish it off. So what tends to happen is people living on the 6th and 7th floor say that they are not connected to the ground. They feel isolated. And of course, if you've heard of a lot of stories with this isolation, people tend to get alienated, and also it leads to psychological problems. So we said that there has to be social distribution. So in this project also, they let us develop the brief ourselves. They gave us only room numbers. They said, give us maximum rooms and your program. So we developed everything from a gym, recreational area. We developed even a clinic room for a consultant to come for healthcare, a coffee shop, name it. There's a reading room, there's a lecture room, there is a computer room, there's a pantry, there's everything across the building, and that's how we distributed it. So the idea of social spaces and social equity was important. And that's a section of the building. These are architectural drawings that when we develop them, it's not only about providing the facilities, it's also the idea of connecting program to these facilities. So legibility is important and accessibility is important. So without these things, programs don't work, right? So, and then you dissolve the idea of the panopticon through that. So that was the rendering when we won the competition. Again, it's an east and west building. So it's a no-brainer that this building was cooking up. So we had to design an idea of a fin. It's a very simple board kind of fin that we developed. And the idea of the television space, actually the television room is there, suspended where you go below. That's the building. It just got completed. We got occupation. Furniture is not done, but we've just finished the building and it's ready to occupy. So this is the lower floor plan where the dining area happens. And so what's interesting is it's got 3 entrances, one from here, one from the Maidan, and one for faculty, because there's also faculty residences here. So it's a very mixed use kind of building. And that's the more or less typical floor plan. So it's got 3 cores, and the center is like an atrium. That's a rendering, and that's also a rendering. The TV space, the connections, and that's the space that is finished. So the staircase leading to the TV space. So we said the accessible spaces actually become, the red fire escape, red, that should get highlighted. That's the computer room there. Yeah, so more or less that's the project from the inside. Yeah, and I'd end with a thank you for calling me here. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Pleasure.
ఒకసారి అవగానే స్టూడెంట్స్ ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఏమంటారు
అది కూడా ఓకే. So please retain on the stage.